Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's America Walks webinar, the Safer Fleets Challenge, how adopting intelligent speed assistance can make your community a better place to walk. For those of you joining us today, we have two webinar facilitators who will handle our question and answer session at the end. We're joined today by America Walks board member and City of Nashville Metropolitan Trustee, Erica Gilmore, and then our executive director, Mike McGinn at America Walks. We'd like to take a brief moment to thank our partners and sponsors. We're grateful to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Active People, Healthy Nation program, as well as Tool Design and EcoCounter. So for today's webinar, if you have a question, please, at any point, put it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll hold those questions to the end. We'll have ample time to answer them there. And our webinar is going to be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel after the fact, so you can find it for later reference there. So our webinar speakers today, we're joined by three of them. We have Kathy Chase from the Advocates for Auto and Highway Safety. We have Amy Cohen from Families for Safe Streets, and Jorge Bonilla from the County of Ventura in California. Each of them is going to share a bit of their perspective, coming from very different sides of things, on why it makes sense to implement intelligent speed assistance for government fleets. But before we get to our main program, just want to a brief promotion for our Intersections Initiative. This is a program that helps connect local communities with federal funding and make them aware of the resources that are out there. So if you're still looking into that topic, we've covered it in a previous webinar, but there's also the opportunity here to learn more. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to our first presenter today, Amy.
You're muted, Amy.
Thank you. I'm just sharing my screen and great. Thanks for having me today. I'm going to speak today a little bit about Families for Safe Streets, the speed crisis, and really why you would want to implement intelligent speed assistance in your fleet. I'll share a little bit about the pilot program we had in New York City, and just want to share a little bit about our support services. So here you can see a photo of our members standing in front of 120 body bags representing the 120 people who are killed on our roads every year. And you'll get some statistics in a little while, but a lot of them are because we are not managing speeds on our roadways. So our mission at Families for Safe Streets is to confront the preventable epidemic of traffic violence through advocacy and support. And we chose those words very intentionally, to confront, because there is so much complacency around this crisis on our roads that there is really a need to push back so that we can put in place solutions that are proven, like intelligent speed assistance. We were founded in 2014 in New York City, and we now have chapters across the country.
Hey, Amy.
Sorry,
don't want to interrupt, but your slides on our end say loading. We can actually see your slides.
Let me see. Sometimes it works better when you... All right, just a minute. Give it one more try, and if not, we'll just wing it.
Here we
There you
go.
go. Now we can see him.
I know, it wasn't showing because it was loading the full view, so I will you'll just watch it this way instead, I guess. So there's the picture of us. So we have all lost a family member or suffered a serious injury in a crash. We do have 20 chapters across the country, and here you can see where we are represented. And as I said, we've all been personally impacted. And for me, this was my son. He was 12 years old. He was in 8th grade. He was a street savvy, bright New Yorker who knew how to get around our streets, and still they are not safe enough. He was just trying to get home from school. He went to middle school in the neighborhood, which if you at all know New York City kids travel all over the city to get to school. And I was so thrilled. He only had to go a few blocks, came home, grabbed a snack, and he just had to cross the street in front of our house to get to soccer practice. And that turned out to be a deadly act. After he died, I had so much pain, it had to go somewhere. I poured it into preventing this from happening to anyone else. And we do this fight. This was one of the first graphics I saw about traffic violence after Sammy died. And I show it in every presentation, even though at this point it is outdated and the CDC has not updated the image. But the numbers sadly have not changed, which is that we perform horribly compared to nearly every other high-income nation. We have twice as many people die in traffic crashes as Canada to our north, 4 times as nearly all of the EU, Japan, Australia, many other countries. And the horrific part is based on looking at that slide alone, we know that traffic fatalities and serious injuries are preventable. These are not accidents. We have the tools in our toolbox to prevent this heartache on our roads. I mean, for me, it's 9 years since Sammy died. And there's not a day goes by that isn't still hard. And yet, I know I can't see all of you. I didn't realize we wouldn't have all the participants on the screen, but you can, do this in your room. I doubt there is anybody on this call who will not raise their hand when I say, have you never had somebody who jokes about speeding or having a lead foot or, I had to rush to get to my destination? We take so lightly the dangers of driving too quickly. And speed kills. We have the data that shows, at lower speed limits, when people are following it, you are much more likely to survive a crash. I mean, the driver who killed Sammy was probably going 40. And, you have an 8 or 9 time chance of not making it at 40. And you have a 9 time chance of surviving, a 90% chance, 9 out of 10, if the driver is only going slower. Similarly, slower driving allows people to have more time to stop. Look at the differences of this braking distance at the various speeds. Similarly, you can't nearly see as well when drivers are going fast. It really reduces your field of vision. And I will share, I heard a statistic recently that in fact, children also have a limited understanding of speed, and in that, they really can't judge how fast someone is driving over 20 miles per hour. So there's been a lot of work across the country on managing for speed with slower speed limits and with, roadway design. But we rarely talk about, other ways. And failure to address this high cost, these high speeds has a huge cost. In 2020, 11,258 people, or 29%, almost a third of everyone killed on our roadways was in a speed-related crash. It has huge impacts on, financially, but 46 billion. And it's really obvious that people don't see this as a problem because in surveys, 20% said they exceeded this posted speed limit. They readily admitted it 10 miles per hour or more, whether it's on arterials, minor arterials, all kinds of roads. People are admitting it. They're finding it in, in data that they are collecting. We know we have a crisis of speed on our roadways, but we have not moved to really put in place a solution that exists already to make sure people don't drive above the speed limit. So intelligent speed assistance is a technology that goes in the vehicle. It's onboard software that logs the position of the car using GPS data and a digital map, recognizes signs. And if the car is going above the speed limit, it first gives a warning sound, and then it automatically applies pressure on the brake so that the vehicle slows down automatically. We get a lot of questions that say, oh, well, what about an ambulance? There are overrides that allow, a very short-term one is the one they did in New York City that allows you to, if you have to pull quickly away from somebody and need to accelerate. But it's proven technology, and Kathy's going to share a lot more about the technology and how it works. But I really want to encourage people who are, either advocating for or from a municipality to lead by example, right? Our city fleets on our roadways are often a huge percentage of the vehicles on the road. And as a city employee, you have an obligation to, be your city's best self and lead by example. There is precedent for this in terms of, trucks on our roadways. A lot of municipal fleets have put in place side guards as a way to, lead by example for other commercial fleets. They've done it in New York City, San Francisco, Seattle, the state of Massachusetts, DC. So there is precedence for this, and this is really an opportunity that we are hoping you will take advantage of after today's webinar. In New York City, Families for Safe Streets really supported and advocated for a pilot program that was undertaken by DCAS, the Division of Citywide Administrative Services, putting ISA in a pilot of 50 vehicles of the city fleet. And there's been some incredible results from that pilot. During the time we've had so far, hard-braking events were reduced by 36%. And vehicles complied with local speed limits 99% of the time. The 1% represented the time between, initial acceleration and the time it takes for ISA to reduce the speed. Incredible results. So there's no question that it works. So we encourage you today to join the Safe Fleet Challenge. This is your opportunity to, as municipal leaders, to lead the way and hopefully set a precedent. I mean, this is a technology that should be in every vehicle across the country, but you have control to push for this or to implement it in your city, and join the challenge and lead by example. Before we close, I do just want to share briefly, Families for Safe Streets. As I said, our mission is to confront the preventable epidemic of traffic violence through advocacy. So for pushing for legislative and policy changes like this one, as well as supporting anyone who is personally impacted. And I have to share, it was a lifesaver for me. And we want to be sure that people know that we have supports out there for anybody who's lost a family member or suffered a serious injury. We have support groups, peer mentoring, logistical assistance, a resource guide. Really, the most important message I want you to know today is that we are here with these principles to support family members. They should not go through this alone. So that's me, and that's my contact info. Happy to be in touch or answer any questions after the webinar as well.
Thank you, Amy, for that, and for the contact info. Families for Safe Streets has taken such a leadership role in New York and now across the nation as well. Kathy Chase from Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. It's a national advocacy organization that works, among other things, on safer vehicles. So Kathy, you're up.
Thanks, Mike. I just want to take a moment to commend Amy for her ongoing bravery and fortitude to really put the importance of this issue and share the most painful time in her life so that other families don't have to suffer what she and her family have gone through. So Amy, I just want to thank you for that. I also want to thank Mike and the entire America Walks team. It's really been an honor of Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety to partner both with Families for Safe Streets and with America Walks. We consider you cherished friends and allies, and especially as we kick off this initiative today, which is very exciting. For those of you who aren't familiar, Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety is a nonprofit lobbying organization. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C. We work on the federal and state levels to pretty much make the road safer for all road users. We have a board of directors that is comprised of some of the leading property casualty insurance companies and some of the leading public health safety, consumer and law enforcement organizations and individuals. We were created in 1989, so we've been around for a bit. And our mantra, if you will, is pretty aligned with what has been come to known lately as the safe system approach, which acknowledges that people will make mistakes on the roadways and that people have a limited tolerance for injury. And it takes these concepts into effect when moving forward with solutions, which include safer vehicles, safer roadways, safer drivers and road users, and then post-crash care. This is something that Advocates has been working on for over 30 years, and we're thrilled to be embracing this new technology, along with other technologies in cars, to address the epidemic that's happening on our roadways. As Amy mentioned, nearly 30% of fatal crashes involve speeding. And this would not be tolerated in any other type or mode of transportation. And yet it happens every year, year after year on our roadways. The good news is that we do have proven solutions like ISA or intelligent speed assist. And I was asked to talk today about what ISA is, but simply put, as Amy already mentioned, it's technology that you install in the car to prevent someone from traveling over the speed limit. Now, what do we come up against in terms of, backlash or opposition on that issue is people like to speed or people do speed. And if you ask someone, a parent especially, if they would like to have this technology in their cars for their teenagers, I would venture to guess, almost every parent would say yes. So similarly, if we want it for our teenagers, we should want it for everyone because everyone is sharing the roads with each other. So ISA is an in-vehicle system that provides information to the driver. So on the vehicle speed relative to the posted speed limit. Also, it may discourage them from further increasing speed past the limit if the driver doesn't take action. There are two types of ISA systems, active and passive. The passive system will only alert the driver when the driving is above or exceeding the speed limit. It's up to the driver to take the action. The active response by the technology can work in several ways. One system can introduce resistance to gas pedals, making it harder, but still possible to speed. The most aggressive automated systems limit gas flow, restraining the engine so drivers can accelerate up to, but not over the speed limit. This can be used on both an electric car and your traditional combustion engine. ISA can be overridden by the driver. That's really important to assert because one of the comments we receive is, well, what if there's an emergency and someone needs to speed up? It is possible for a driver to exceed the limit set. Some manufacturers also offer built-in top speed limiters that must be set manually, whereas some systems will automatically limit the top speed to the posted speed limit. The systems do work in real time, mainly with GPS devices linked to speed limits. Some may use onboard sensors or cameras that read the speed limit signs and then integrate speed limit data with vehicle information on speed. I also just wanted to share that this, as I mentioned earlier, this is not new technology. In fact, Europe is way ahead of the US in adopting and mandating ISA in vehicles. The largest research efforts studied several thousand Swedish drivers using systems giving an advisory alert, pedal feedback, or throttle constriction for more than a year. And they found a decrease in speeding violations for each system. In fact, by July of next year, all new cars in Europe will have ISA installed. So this is not something cutting edge. This is the US falling behind and needing to catch up what's happening in other countries. In addition to the Safe Fleets Challenge we're discussing today, which advocates wholly endorses, of course, we continue to push for federal legislation to require ISA. And in fact, many of you, I would venture to guess, are quite familiar with the transportation law, also known as the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, or the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was enacted last year. And we pushed very hard to get an ISA requirement in it. In fact, there was one in the House version of the bill, the INVEST Act, which was inspired by a standalone bill by Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky of Illinois. But unfortunately, during the debate process, it did not make it into the final bill. Needless to say, we haven't given up, and we do firmly believe that a federal requirement is needed in order to get this technology into all cars. We also have been pushing for other technology to address some of the other main contributors to fatalities on our roadways, which are, in addition to speeding, alcohol impairment and distraction, and also people not buckling up. Again, there are technological solutions to all of these that we're pushing for, including automatic emergency braking, which just a little side note, a proposal has been sent by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to the White House for its review. So we continue to urge strongly the U.S. Department of Transportation to issue this rule, which will address so many of the problems happening on our roadways. So back to ISA, which is an essential technology. It's just not required yet. So that's why we are participating in these challenges, so that we can not only make the road safer, but also get the public to have a higher level of acceptance of how these work, which will go hand in hand with getting them into all cars, which, as Amy said, is our ultimate goal. So in doing so, we have been advancing minimum performance standards as the way to accomplish getting them into cars. And I just want to mention that there's an equity issue involved with this. If these technologies are not included as standard equipment, then there could be an upcharge for them, and not everyone can afford that. I often say, every family deserves a vehicle with the safest braking system. Similarly, everyone should be protected, all road users, especially vulnerable road users like pedestrians and bicyclists, from speeding vehicles. And this is a wonderful technological advancement to make that happen. In conclusion, I just wanted to say that what Amy said, speed kills. It's an old mantra. It should not be a punchline. It should be a cautionary note. And as speed limits are increasing throughout the country, and advocates has been battling numerous pieces of legislation throughout the country that to increase speed limits at a time when fatalities are skyrocketing on our roadways. We should be using every tool that we are familiar with that has been proven to be effective in reducing crashes, like ISA, like AEB, to make our cars safer, to make all road users safer, so that families are not suffering the losses, so that people are not involved in preventable crashes, and so that all of the ripple effects, the unquantifiable benefits are realized. The unquantifiable problems aren't occurring, like the drain on emergency rooms, on first responders, on even traffic and environmental concerns in terms of pollution. There are so many things that happen when a crash occurs. And we know there are solutions, and that's why we're involved in getting ISA into the fleets with this challenge and ultimately into all new vehicles. Thank you again, Mike and the America Walks team and Amy, and I can't wait to listen to what Jorge has to say about their experience. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. And the leadership of Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety in setting federal motor vehicle safety standards, which is, you know, the thing that brought us seatbelts and airbags, is really critical. And there is new technology. And again, we started out being way ahead of Europe on this stuff. They copied us on these things, including the safety ratings of new vehicles as well. And now at this point, Europe has far exceeded us, requiring intelligent speed assistance on all new vehicles. And we're here as part of this campaign. And now's probably a good time to throw it into the chat before I start talking with Jorge. You know, we're launching a campaign to try to get 50 governments, whether city, county, or state governments, to retrofit their vehicles with intelligent speed assistance. So it's not just a feature available on new cars. It's an over-the-counter opportunity to buy the equipment to make government vehicles follow the speed limit. So we have a fact sheet that you can take a look at. We have a draft executive order or council resolution. As some of you may know, I'm the former mayor of Seattle. Management of the fleet is usually not often a matter of legislative action. It's usually left to the executive and the department head to manage the vehicles they buy and to, you know, use the money that they're given effectively and to encourage safety in the use of the vehicles. So this is something that a mayor and a department head could do on their own without legislative action. But it's also something that a legislator, whether again at the state, the county, or city level, could, you know, or an agency, a transit agency or other independent government outside of that, could choose, a legislator could choose to raise this issue with the executive branch and ask for action. So, for example, in King County, Washington, the King County Council has asked the executive to come back with a report about the installation of intelligent speed assistance on its vehicles. So that's why there is a draft executive order / council resolution. And it's just something to get your local elected officials or agency officials thinking about how could they implement this. And again, our goal is we want to get 50 places by 2025. And as Kathy said, in addition to saving lives, I mean, I really, why it's hard for me to understand why city employees or public employees, you know, excepting emergency vehicles, of course, why they should violate the speed limit set by their own government. So I think it's a great starting point to build acceptance, build understanding, and ultimately lead to broader safety standards. And of course, this is accompanying designing streets better and other efforts as part of the Safe Systems approach. So with that, I'm going to do a little interview here with Jorge, because Ventura County is actually doing the work. So we just want to share his experience on this. So Jorge, why don't you start off by just telling us who you are and what your job is?
All right. Well, my name is Jorge Bonilla. I am the fleet operations manager for the County of Ventura, and we're located in Southern California. We are fairly new to this project with the intelligent speed governor system. The reason how we rolled onto it is because we stumbled onto it due to telematics that we installed in our vehicles. If people are not familiar with telematics, it's a device that we installed that we can get mileage data, fuel data, and speeding data in there. So when we started pulling all these reports, we noticed that, hey, we got a lot of speeders in the county. And just to let you know, the County of Ventura, I manage about 1,900 vehicles, and about 1,500 of those vehicles are vehicles that actually travel on the roads that people drive on every day. The other few hundred vehicles are construction equipment that really don't travel on the road. So we noticed the speeding violations that were just excessive. I mean, there were some pretty bad ones on there.
Give me a few examples of the speeding, Jorge. I mean, without naming names, but you actually have the data.
Ventura County doesn't have, the largest freeway that runs through Ventura County is the 101. 65 miles an hour is the top speed limit. So we had a couple in there that 103 miles an hour. And these are county employees that, you know, get paid by the hour regardless of how fast or slow you're going. No reason to be traveling that rate. To me, it doesn't matter. They weren't a first responder. They weren't law enforcement. They were just a regular old county employee. And yeah, there's a few of those. School zones, you know, 25-mile-an-hour school zones or residential. We're seeing 50 to 60 mile an hour reports in those. So that raised a big red flag. Our initial, the way we approach this is we ran the reports, introduced them to the departments because there's multiple departments with the county. We don't manage drivers, we manage the vehicles. So we let them, hey, here's a report, here's what you got. You got to do something about this. You're gonna kill somebody, you're gonna hurt somebody. And we noticed that the speeding still continued. So then I started looking around, you know, speed governors, intelligent speed governors, which I call non-intelligent speed governors. And we found a vendor that I did some background, talked to him, and I got a good feeling for them, and I'll just throw their name out there. Sturdy Corporation, they're out of North Carolina, and they had both systems. So I said, okay, let's run a pilot on a few of our vehicles. And I was very impressed with the speed with the intelligent one, because you could set it however you want, whether you want them to only travel at the posted speed limit, maybe a few miles above the posted speed limit or below the posted speed limit. So we did a pilot on those, and we got very good positive feedback from the departments, because now the managers, supervisors don't have to manage speeding violations, because in actuality, there will be no more speeding violations. So the other governor would only top you out at top speed. So it would only top out at 75 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour. So basically a freeway speed. The smart governor you could use on all the roads and the streets, school zones. It's a very neat system. We're very impressed with it. The hard sale is a cost, obviously. But another department is human services agencies. They are on board now. We're gonna do 80 of their vehicles that we just started about 2 weeks ago, installing it on theirs. So hopefully other departments fall behind that. One of the biggest things obviously is cost to them. How much does it cost? And it's taxpayers' money. It's not in their budget. Is one of the roadblocks we're getting from the departments right now, why they can't install it.
But before I get to the more on the cost issue, in the vehicles you've installed it so far, what are you seeing with regards to speeding now in the vehicles in which it's installed?
There is no speeding, because they really can't. They can't speed.
That's just amazing.
Yeah,
it just solves the problem.
Yeah, it really does. Managers actually, like I said, managers are happy because they don't have to manage the drivers now as far as their speeding. Now they can actually do their job. The public is safe. The streets are safe. And there was a little, pushback from drivers. Why, I need to go faster so I can get my job done faster. And that is not a good enough reason for us to not implement this device in the vehicles.
Are you able, in talking to manufacturers, one of the things they point to is the fuel savings from the lower speeds.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been able to get data yet on fuel savings from these vehicles and how that compares to the cost of installation?
Not yet, because again, we're fairly new into this. We're probably 6 months into the first pilot and just starting the larger pilot. So that's probably data we'll probably have in a year or two, or at least better data to see how that is. But that's
Yeah,
definitely
so for people who are watching, who are wondering about the cost, what we have heard is that because you also have it also limits acceleration to a certain degree. So when you limit both acceleration and speed, that's when the engine's using the most gas. So
Correct.
there is definitely a fuel savings.
There's definitely going to be a fuel savings. It's just, unfortunately, I don't have that data just yet.
Right.
But we'll definitely have it here in the near future.
And the claim that is made by the manufacturers is based on the fact that this is actually in operation on many commercial fleets for the reasons of safety and fuel savings as well.
Correct.
Solves their management issues as well.
Yeah. Our biggest concern was the safety.
Right.
Fuel savings and maintenance of the vehicles was second to the safety aspect of this. It's just way too many speeding violations going across our county. So that was the number one. That has been the number one driver.
I'm really glad you spoke about that, because I can imagine that some cities are going to say, well, our employees behave safely. But I think with your experience of tracking speed, we also got the report from San Francisco. San Francisco tracked how city vehicles were being used. And they found the same thing, that there's a significant number of employees who, while using city vehicles on city business, are speeding.
Oh yeah.
So it's not that this is an inherently safer set of vehicle users. Who knows? Maybe they are. Maybe the public is worse than city employees or state employees. But what we learned is that public employees, there's a set of public employees who are not safe drivers.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, in actuality, right? They drive them the way they drive them because it's not their vehicle. So, sometimes we say, pedal to the metal. If it was their vehicle, they probably wouldn't drive them like that. And with this, again, with the telematics that we initially installed, that's how the ball got rolling, and that's how we started seeing all these harsh brakings, harsh accelerating, speeding violations. That's what opened our eyes with, whoa, this is a large problem. It's not a small scale problem. That 103 mile an hour one, that was just one vehicle compared to the thousands, the 1,000 vehicles that we have in our fleet that potentially could be speeding every day.
I'm going to introduce now, we're going to move to the group Q&A now. Thank you. If you've been sending us questions, we're tracking them. But I want to introduce one of our board members at America Walks, Erica Gilmore. She's an elected official. Erica, why don't you just introduce yourself and then launch with some questions for the panel?
Yes, well, thank you, Mike. And I want to thank the panelists once again so much for being here. I am Erica Gilmore, a Metropolitan Trustee here in the city of Nashville and Tennessee. And I'm also a board member, an excited board member for America Walks. So thank you so much for that very engaging conversation. So we talked about, actually touched upon some of the issues of what some of the objections would be about drivers not being able to exceed the limit, or maybe it being cost prohibitive. But we do know that a person could save per vehicle $1,867 in savings and reduced fuel costs. So what are some of the other objections that you might hear in your respective areas for why not to implement ISA?
I'm glad to jump in, Erica. Thank you for the question. I think across the board, when we're talking about highway and auto safety issues, especially behavioral issues, there is a sentiment that or an objection to what is referred to as a nanny state. I know how to drive safely. I know how quickly I can drive. I don't need to wear my seatbelt, or whatever the case may be. It's my personal prerogative. However, the counter to that is that it's not just a personal prerogative. It impacts everyone on the roads. When someone speeds, that yes, they're making a decision to speed, but it's endangering everyone around them. So it's not just a personal decision and of all of the impacts that are incumbent upon that. It really affects everyone. Additionally, there's a price tag associated with that. With each crash, there are first responders, there are hospital costs, there are damages to the infrastructure, and all of those are borne in large part by taxpayers. So, I think that's the counter to the argument that, if I want to speed, I should be allowed to speed. Well, no, you shouldn't.
I just wanted to chime in with what Kathy's saying. I mean, I think I opened our presentation saying our mission is to confront the preventable epidemic of traffic violence, because there is so much complacency. And, I'm thrilled that there are so many folks from municipalities across the country, but for those of you who are advocates, this is also a critical role for you to push back on that complacency and push for your local governments to adopt this in their fleet, because it's not going to happen without your voices, because there is just this, as Kathy is saying, people have a right to speed, this isn't a problem we have to address. No, your role is to share these numbers and demand that your local government lead by example and adopt ISA.
Jorge, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the one, again, we're fairly new to this. We don't have too many vehicles just yet. The few that we did have, one of their concerns was, well, I need to get my job done. Yeah, but we understand that you're just gonna have to manage now. If your routes, you might have to find a different route. But speeding is not an option for you to get your job done. You get paid 8 hours a day, regardless if you get it done that day or not. You still have the next day to do it. So we'll see as we go further with bigger departments. We're probably going to get other excuses why, one of them was safety. Well, I need to get on the freeway, and if this car is going 80 miles an hour and he's not letting me in, I need to go faster. Well, no, that's not the case. You just gotta, it's a driver habit that that has to change, and that's probably the number one thing that we have to get across to all these drivers is just change their driving habits.
So I have a follow-up question for you, Jorge. Did you find that any of the employees felt that it may be punitive and may affect their overall employee record in a way that it did not before with this new ISA being implemented?
It depended on the department, because we got mail couriers that we implemented it on that they were worried, well, I can't get the mail fast enough, and we are evaluated by our routes and how quick we do them. But again, it comes down to you get paid so many hours of the day. Your manager, your supervisor is going to have to figure out different methods to get the job done, because you got to follow the law. And it's simply, that is the law, is stay within the speed limit.
Definitely want people to be safe. Amy, it's very impressive what you did and how you affected New York to implement the ISA. Did you have difficulty deciding which office to go through first? What barriers did you face in trying to get this type of technology implemented?
Well, let me first give a huge shout out. I know Eric Richardson is on the call from the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. We were fortunate to have amazing partners, and really it was, them coming saying they wanted to do something like this. And, just us having their back, for any pushback on it. So we didn't actually have to push very hard, and we were very lucky that the city was so interested. I know that won't be the case everywhere. So, people should really be prepared to fight hard. This could be a harder battle in other locations.
I want to jump in on that, Erica, part of the reason that this appealed to me as a campaign, when I learned about intelligent speed assistance, in fact, it was on a safer vehicle webinar we were doing with Kathy Chase, and there was another individual who follows European safety standards, and he pointed out that London had retrofitted their buses with it to follow the speed limit. And as a former mayor, I just when you're mayor for 4 years, you're always searching for what's a good thing we can announce to the public that we did to improve the city. And I, as a mayor, was very concerned with safety. I was also very concerned with climate as an issue. And I saw this, and just from a political physics perspective, it was like, if I were mayor and somebody had told me about this, I would have jumped on it, because I could have pulled in my the equivalent of Jorge here into my office, and I said, what can we do? When can we do this? Give me a report on this. And we could have done it without necessity of the city council taking action. I wouldn't necessarily even need an appropriation if I could fit it within existing budget and start to count the savings later. So it really, speaking to mayors everywhere, if you're listening, or county execs or governors, this is a tangible step you can take immediately to demonstrate your commitment to safety, to Vision Zero, if that's been adapted in your place, or to climate change goals, if that's what you've adopted. And you can show the public that you are safeguarding the public, because safety is the highest priority of any elected official. And given the epidemic of roadway deaths and increase in pedestrian deaths. So really, I would suggest to advocates out there listening, start asking for it and try to find those that are willing to do it. And I think as more people do it and we get more testimony, as we're getting from Jorge, we're going to see more places picking it up, and that'll just lead to safer streets.
Definitely. And I would say lower insurance costs too, right?
Yeah, it's hard to calculate that, but I do know as mayor too, we looked at the budget and how much we set aside in reserves to pay for crashes and injuries on our streets. Cities are often named as defendants just for the design of the streets, as well as in cases where their employees themselves were driving. So I imagine that obviously being safer will have, and most governments self-insure, right? They may buy insurance at the very highest level, but most self-insure. They just set aside a certain proportion of their taxes every year to pay claims against the city. So greater safety, of course, would lead to budget savings over the long run for cities and towns.
Definitely. I just think about when I was a council member, how many cases we had to take on that people would sue the city each time there was an accident, and it would happen quite often. I think this would reduce it.
Yeah. So clearly it would affect. Erica, I jumped in and just gave you a long answer to one of the questions. Take her away. Take control.
No, I think this is wonderful, and I think you have wonderful points. The energy efficiency of it all, the ability to save as it relates to fuel, gas, house effect, to be a leader in your city and not behind. I don't see why anyone would not want to do it. I don't know what type of things or obstacles that Kathy ran up against, since she does take the legislation to the federal government and lobby on our behalf. So maybe you could share some of those things and maybe next steps on what we can do, what you see in the future, since it seems like it's moving forward more in Europe and the northern states, and maybe we can get some action and traction down here in some of these southern states.
Thanks, Erica. Yeah, I want to just add one comment to the cost conversation, in that our experience has been, because we've pushed for many advances, like Mike mentioned, over the career of advocates, including airbags, seatbelts, most recently rear view cameras, which are now required in cars. And we worked with many families who either they themselves backed over their young child or a loved one did. And like Amy, told their story over and over again until we were successful in requiring rear view cameras. And one of the big arguments was the cost. Well, economies of scale, once they're required, the costs are going to drop. Members of the auto industry would say, well, cameras cost hundreds of dollars. Well, now, does anyone have a phone that doesn't have a camera in it? Cameras are so ubiquitous in our society. And I think similarly, we can get there with ISA, where if it's required, starting with this challenge, getting it into the city fleets, and then people understand how many unquantifiable benefits there are to these systems. It's going to spread. Now, again, a plug that this will happen even more quickly if we can get it required via federal legislation requiring the U.S. Department of Transportation to require it in new cars. That said, USDOT doesn't need the mandate from Congress. They can go ahead and advance a rule right now and require, go through the rulemaking process where they offer a notice of proposed rulemaking and people comment, and we can start getting ISA into cars even quicker than waiting for Congress. So I'm hoping that this challenge really jumpstarts a national effort, both on a local level, and then it grows and grows and grows, and we really do something tangible to reduce the dangers of speeding on our roadways.
Yeah, and the practice of using cities or counties or states as a way to build momentum for federal action is a well-established one in American politics. And I will say that executives are always looking to, mayors and county execs and governors are always looking to see what their peers are doing and what type of public response they get to it. So, hopefully this is the type of thing that can really start to gain momentum with the decision makers who have the power to implement it. The federal action is, we've all weighed in. There was a rulemaking on safety standards not that long ago by the federal government, and we all weighed in and encouraged them to take a closer look at intelligent speed assistance and begin implementing it, as well as other safety features of vehicles. But sometimes the federal government moves slowly, as we know. So we don't have to wait for them, for cities and towns and states and counties to take action, as Jorge just demonstrated, and that's real tangible effects on safety immediately. So, but that's the way to build momentum for a larger action. Yeah. So, take that, I'd encourage people out there to add this to their list of requests as they have their meetings with elected officials in the coming year to review efforts on safety. I know in Seattle, Seattle Neighborhood Greenways has made that request of Seattle's government, having learned of this. So the more people that can bring this to the attention of folks or people who are already in a position to carry it within government, the better.
Is there an effort, or how can we get more BIPOC people involved in these efforts? Since there are areas, or sometimes the ones that have the highest fatalities as it relates to crashes and things of that nature in those underserved areas.
We work very hard to make sure all communities are a part of this fight for change. BIPOC communities, low-income communities, unfortunately, are often disproportionately represented in communities across the country on people who have lost loved ones or suffered a serious injury, because those are the communities that are last to get the, safe streets designs to prevent the crisis on our roadways. So our organization is, our membership sadly is very diverse and reflects the, crisis that we have on our roadways. And we bring those voices to bear when we press and demand for change.
Thank you, Amy.
And what I would say is one of our goals at America Walks is to support local advocacy. So by coming up with the fact sheet and the draft resolution and this webinar, we're trying to, give tools to what I like to call, the kitchen table advocates, the folks who are volunteers, who want safer communities, and just oftentimes just need a little help figuring out, what's feasible or possible. And so this, to me, again, I think is a really simple ask. And the point of the questioner is really well taken. The deaths and injuries among BIPOC communities are much higher than among white communities. And it's a number of factors, including that some of the least safe streets, the most unsafe streets, tend to go through BIPOC communities as well as poorer communities, for the benefit of people driving through those communities. And one of our big efforts at America Walks, and Ben put in the Intersections Initiative at the front end, is to provide support for those communities in seeking federal funding to improve their streets. But again, this is a way to get at vehicles as well as streets. And sometimes those street redesign and rebuild efforts can take time as well. And we could get safer vehicles out there a lot faster in some cases than the rebuilding of our streets. But both are critical. And really for us at America Walks, we've been much more focused on, I would say we've made a transition at America Walks. Like first was just educating people about the benefits of walking and why it's good for health, et cetera, and educating decision makers. Clearly we were pushing for safer streets. This is for us is also an extension of our work by really getting deeper into safer vehicles overall. And intelligent speed assistance is a kind of a nested campaign within a larger campaign about safer vehicles. And vehicles are getting larger, they're getting heavier with batteries in them. Acceleration of electric vehicles is extremely high compared to gas vehicles. And, which is making these vehicles deadlier. The visibility is worsening. So there's lots of other things we can do, but this one was just such a straightforward way for people to take action today and build support for more action on safer vehicles that we reached out to all our partners and putting this together. And we've been joined by the League of American Bicyclists, by the Vision Zero Network is also going to be pushing this. So we're very excited about this campaign as a way to start really advancing that discussion of safer vehicles as well as safer streets. We have a question here. We have a recent death of an 11-year-old in our city, and not only am I looking to make our city streets safer, but also those around our county building. Is there a way to find out who owns the road? What would you recommend as a first step in this process? Amy, do you want to take a shot at that one? How did you start your advocacy, and what did you find when you started that advocacy?
For us, our first fight was actually lowering the speed limit. And then we did do a big push on roadway design as well. And we started the fight in roadway design with our partner Transportation Alternatives, our sponsoring organization that, was this sort of street by street fight, really looking at the most dangerous arterials. What were the deadliest, high injury corridors, high fatalities, and focused our efforts on really trying to fix those, and then pushed actually for a more comprehensive plan. In terms of finding out who owns a particular street, really probably the best solution is to go to your local, DOT or Department of Public Works, whoever administers at the local level your streets. And then, of course, when you argue that they should fix the street, they'll tell you when it's not theirs. That'll be their first response if it's not their responsibility.
In addition to Amy's suggestions, which I agree with, also you get your local politicians involved, your city, state, and even federal, if needed, officials need to know what's happening on the roadways, and they might be able to pull some strings for you and get a quicker answer.
And another thing I've seen in the questions is how many places have done this already, and what is the record so far? And this is really a start of we have to understand in this country, whereas in Europe it's required in all new cars, it's not a large number of governments that have acted so far. New York City's pilot got a lot of media because it felt very new, because it was very new. We know that Ventura County is doing it. We understand Somerville, Mass is looking at it. King County is looking at it. But even though, as I said, commercial fleets have been doing it, the government side and public fleets are a relatively new effort. So we're kind of calling on the folks here to help us get that effort going and expand it.
Folks who join in quickly will really be, having an opportunity to get a lot of attention to this effort, because as Mike said, it is a new effort. So, we encourage you to push your local government to go first, or if you are representing government to jump into the fray. We are getting a lot of questions, and I don't think it's been answered on, how much does it cost? What are sort of some of the more nuts and bolts logistics? This is, just to be clear, I think Kathy spelled it out, it can be an aftermarket add-on. So yes, we would love it to be in all new cars, but you can take an existing car and add a product to it. And Jorge probably has those costs more readily available. But just in case anybody missed it, Eric Richardson did put in the chat from the New York City program that people should consider applying for this to make your city fleet have ISA through the Federal Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. But Jorge, can you share a little bit more about the vendor you used, how long it took, how much it cost? I see a lot of questions on that.
Yeah, no, I seen those questions too. So the vendor that we're using, they're out of North Carolina and they're Sturdy. They're called Sturdy Corporation. So far, so good. Very, very helpful. They're with you from the beginning to the end. Because Ventura County was, it was new to them. They had to really map out the county because that's how their system works off of map data, and if speed limits haven't been updated. So we ran into some issues, but their help center was there and on it to update a lot of this speed postings. Right now, the intelligent governor costs about $1,100 per vehicle. So and it doesn't matter on the manufacturer, and there is some labor behind it. It's not a plug and play on this one. There is some wiring you're gonna have to splice together, so you're gonna have to be a little bit mechanically inclined to have it installed. But it's so far so good. It's working great. Again, I think our biggest roadblock is going to be the cost for some of these departments, and they just didn't budget for it. So I think one of the things we're going to start looking to see if there's grants out there and stuff like that to be able to put this on all the vehicles across the county and not have to worry about departments worry about their budget. Because once it's a one-time cost, there is no maintenance or monthly subscription fees or anything. So that's the other good thing.
Yeah, I have to say
New York
1,100.
City,
Go ahead, Amy.
New York City did find some cost savings on wear and tear, on brakes, on other things by installing the ISA. And I know city budgeting is complicated, and you can't say you saved here to actually have that outlay in the beginning, but it is something when you're looking at costs that, you really should stress.
And we'll definitely see that probably. I mean, it's just that we're so new to it. I just don't have the data yet.
So, well, at that cost, given the cost of a vehicle, an annual operating cost of a vehicle, we're not talking about something that's not a large cost. Let's be clear. That is not a large cost given again the cost of purchasing and maintaining a vehicle on an annual basis. And then you look at the wear and tear and the fuel savings. There was one question here about
Mike, and also the cost of crashes themselves that are being
oh my
prevented.
goodness, yes, the cost of the crashes themselves, and in which case let's put us and we cannot, but the property damage there as opposed, and then let's not even attempt to put a cost on the lives tragically ended or changed, right? Like the cost issue, I think obviously, I'm speaking as a former mayor, the cost issue is something you have to manage. You actually have to find the dollars in the budget that have been appropriated to do it. But again, in the scheme of city budgets or county or state budgets, I see Erica nodding her head too. This is not a large cost. This is what decision
It's the
makers
cost of
do
one
all the
lawsuit
time.
against a municipality for killing or injuring somebody.
Yeah. This is what governments do all the time. They say, this is a priority. You feed it into your budget calculations at the front end. You figure out what is a lesser priority, and you take that off your budget at the back end, and you try to do things that will save you money in the long run. So cost is yes, it's a meaningful concern in the sense that all governments have to actually write a check to pay for something, and the money has to come from somewhere. But from the political standpoint, this is not a viable objection from any elected official to not do this. It just isn't. It's an operational concern, not a policy concern. Erica, do you want to say anything about what
I was just going to say, why do you opened at the beginning how we were very much ahead of Europe as it related to seat belts, and now we've fallen behind. What has happened? Why are we late adopters of this technology? And Europe has almost gone into full adoption of it as it relates to their buses and public transportation. What's going on, do you think?
Kathy, you want to take a shot at that?
I'm glad to. It's not just this, unfortunately. It's auto safety in general. We are so far behind other countries. The United States was the first to create and implement what is known as NCAP, the New Car Assessment Program, which is often referred to as stars on cars. When you go to buy a car, the sticker on the window will have some stars. And it's reached the point that it's so outdated that most vehicles get the maximum amount of stars, and consumers don't know this. But that said, the US DOT is in the process of, of trying to update this process. But just to give one example, other than intelligent speed assist, rear seatbelt reminders, those have been required in Europe for years. And, if you think about who's in the back seat, it's kids, it's older adults, it's people who really need to be wearing a seatbelt. And the United States Congress required the US to require rear seatbelt reminders years ago, and the US DOT still hasn't happened. So we have just fallen so far behind across the board. It's very frustrating, and that's why we're seeing the US, fatalities are skyrocketing where other countries are declining. These are very real examples of what the US needs to do to get ahead of the problem of nearly 43,000 people being killed every year.
Well, I'm going to use that to transition to the close, because I think what Kathy just pointed out to us here is that, we have taken safety actions in the past as a country that have paid tremendous benefits. We've fallen behind, and we, those of us on the call are certainly going to keep pressuring the federal government to resume the leadership role it once held, or at least try to catch up. But you don't have to wait for us to convince US DOT to take action. You have people in your community, and just as Amy Cohen did in New York City, just as Jorge did as an extremely responsible public servant serving the public, to increase the safety of your community. So we're going to urge you to do that. I think we have some closing slides, Kate. So thank you all for attending. This program is, this campaign that we've launched on safer vehicles, we're just doing this off of your donations, people, the money that you have given to us over the years. We don't have any special grantor or funder of this. And so please consider supporting America Walks, and not just in bringing to you this programming, but in bringing to you these campaigns. And we love you for your support in the past. Next slide, if we have another, or is this it? So I think that might be it. So with that, I would just want to really thank our panelists. I want to thank all of you who chose to stick with us. Really excited to introduce to you our new board member, Erica Gilmore, and let us know the work you're doing in your community. If this is something that's inspired you to take action, please let us know. Reach out to us, keep us updated. If we can lend you a hand, we will. And we'll keep updating you on how we're doing on hitting a goal of 50 governments. I think we can go well beyond that, but we set ourselves a target, and we're not going to get there without you. So thank you all for attending, and thank you all for your work in the community. And a big thank you to all of our panelists and to the staff at America Walks who make this happen. Thanks.
Thank you.